Sandy.
Adam.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Sandy. Hi.
I can do
You
it.
need to take away your shoes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Hi. Hello. Hi, Sandy. Nice to meet you. Hi. Nice to meet you, Sandy. Hi. Wow. Hi, Sandy.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
This is from you.
Wow. Can you explain me what it is?
Yeah, I will show.
Yeah, can you just put it there?
Okay, sure, yeah.
Hi, Sandy.
Easiest jump of my life. Really hurts.
It's true, it's an amazing thing, right?
Yeah.
We fit, yes. What is Deepak? No. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Living room, and yeah, I mean, I'm so happy to have you around, and in a sense, I'm a bit. The whole idea of it being a performance, because I basically host every day people at my house. It's not something that is strange for me or that even need to be called performance, but maybe the only slight difference of all this is that I don't know most of you, except for some of you that already came before here, so I sort of begin to have a familiar faces, but it's maybe for the first time that I am in front of guests that I didn't know before, and maybe this is, if I have to say, if there is a reason out of it being a performance, it's much more about me not knowing who you are. I mean, normally I would invite my guests and I sort of know the guests, but in that sense, maybe also the whole challenge of the idea of the project of the living room, that it should be able to host people that I even don't know, right? It should be able to, it should be also sort of working as a collective public space. And, it's just like to give you a bit of background of me. I mean, I was trained as an architect, and, in architectural schools, all the time, whenever you design a public space, you feel good about it. No, it feels, it feels like designing a public space is much better than designing the villa of your father's friend or whatsoever is that. And I all the time felt good about me, and I all the time chooses to more design public spaces, schools and squares and this and that. And then coming back to Palestine after many years of study, and then I did my PhD and everything, and then coming back to Palestine, and I began to a bit study deeply the Israeli settlement. And then I realized that the Israeli settlement, basically all of them were expropriated in the name of the public. And that means that wherever there was a form, what we call the form of the Masha, which is a bit these lands that belong to everyone. I mean, there was this sort of collectivity in Palestine during the British mandate and before, and people were actively using this land and collecting it together. Israel arrived and decided that this is public. So they translate simply the word Masha into the word public. And and of course, public means for the state. They took it, and this was the way to do settlements. So the whole colonial settlements in the West Bank were completely built on the public. And since that moment, I began to be super suspicious as an architect toward the public, and not necessarily thinking, and the public a lot of time expropriate what was common among people, expropriate what was collective among people. And then I began to be very much interested into these places where people still demand their right to be political agents and to be together, especially when the public would not permit them to do so. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a law in Israel that if there are more than 3 people together in one place, this can be charged as actually coming together and organizing any political struggle. So I lived in a society, in a place under a colonial regime where being a collective might be very dangerous in many ways. And it's from there where all this comes. I mean, this is only to give you a minimum personal introduction on from where, I mean, why I am insisting on my right to host and why I am insisting on my right to build collectivity wherever I go. I believe it's a way to counter colonialism in many ways, but I think that we can still be understanding it in many places where colonialism is not necessarily the norm, but it's still a very important discourse to go around. And you know, I would love you, because as I begin to say, I'm coming from a less privileged place where you know a bit more about me. I know less about you. So if you would tell me a bit about you, about what is more your concern in this period, what would you like a bit more to discuss with me, that would be wonderful, because then we would be a great guest and hosts.
She's also been talking for a long time. So hi, my name is Sam. I don't know what Please don't say hi.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question. You were talking about Palestine and like Israeli settlements. So I was wondering, what do you think about like the current situation with like Israel and Palestine?
I know that I think that we are stuck as the rest of the world is stuck. I believe that we are living in a very difficult historical moment where a regime of colonialism collapsed. I mean, it wasn't only about Israel, Palestine. I think that it was majorly about the whole area and you know, the whole post-colonial plan of dividing the Middle East in that way, of dividing, completely collapsed. So we are in front of revising a whole new, either a whole new post-colonial plan, or eventually its departure as a revolutionary moment where we are trying to free this place, but it feels very much bigger than us. But I can tell you, I mean, in terms of how Palestinian feels, is that they feel that they tried every type of struggle, from the non-violence one to the violence one, to be completely self-dependent, to shoot against, to do, and they each time it felt that it was, the whole struggle was taken into a place where it didn't meant to be. And in a sense there is a bit of, and especially after all what is happening in the Arab world, it feels almost that we are not the only one without state. Everybody already is without state, right? And I don't know, there is a very strange condition of almost being in a tunnel, and you don't know when ever things would be moving differently. But still, I mean, not to be very tragic, I worked for 15 years in refugee camps, and in that sense, you still feel that there is a lot of potentiality there. In camps where I worked, it's like less than half kilometer square, and there are more than 40 NGOs in each of these places. There is great energy, great potentiality into changing certain things. So I don't believe that they completely give up, but there is a very, very strong conscience among Palestinians is that they even don't know how to imagine the day after. So they are not sure anymore that the state is what they are longing for, but they don't know what differently they should ask for. So it's like they even don't know what potentially might be their demand, no? And this makes the whole thing very, very hard to deal with. But again, I mean, we feel strangely enough trapped now as the rest of the world and not anymore completely isolated, if that would make any sense.
So I have a question. My name is Adam, I come from Egypt. And seeing that you mentioned the Arab world, what do you think of the position of the Arab world towards the case right now? Especially after the latest, I'm so sorry to cut you, especially after the latest development in the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel by the US, and what do you think?
You know, it's becoming also very clear that there is a huge distinction between what the people wants and what government wants. And maybe for the first time we are, you know, trying to disconnect governments from people, because also what happened in Egypt in many ways, and you know, we looked at this in, you know, it wasn't only Egypt, it was almost a hope for all of the Middle East, and you know, there is one of the work that if you will go to the exhibition, I advise you to see, and it's very much linked to this idea of the public and the private and to belonging to the public. You know, I all the time faced all this is that Arabs are dirty outside and they are super clean inside their own houses, and as if this is a matter of culture, right? And you know, and at this point I was arguing why I should clean the house of my enemy. I mean, it's basically the regimes were our enemies. Israel is my enemy. So why I should go and clean a street that is not even belonging to me? And you know, when the whole thing of Maidan Tahrir and Mubarak stepped down, and the first action there was that people began to clean everything because finally this is ours. It was for me a sort of an amazing moment of saying, you know, see, this is not the cultural thing. It's about us belonging or not belonging to that place. And inspired by this and by the whole thing of cleaning and how you clean basically the base, the place that you belong to rather than the place that you don't belong to is something that was completely inspiring. And you know, I have a lot of hope that what the whole thing that happened during all this period among the people in a place like the Middle East is not gone. It's not that if the revolution actually is taking a different shapes means that, I mean, I was raised during the first Intifada, and I know what is it to be a collectivity and to have this feeling that being empowered as a collectivity, you can change the world. And I think that a huge generation in the Arab world felt that they can change the world, and this, nobody will take it away. No, nobody will take this away in many ways. So I don't know, I think that they know that people are hopeless, and they see that people are frustrated for what is happening, and they see Jerusalem as a last stage of, you know, I personally, I can tell you what I felt. I felt a complete, when this was announced, and you know, with all what Trump brings with him and everything, I felt that there, you know, there is a sense of injustice. No, I was born in Bethlehem, and these streets of Jerusalem was the streets where I grew up. All my memory are there, and now suddenly there is a wall between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and they are claiming that Jerusalem has nothing to do with me. And I feel personally that there is a complete sense of injustice generally in the world. No, it's not about me. It's about thinking, how can we live in a world where it's basically based on a crazy man deciding for just a gesture of injustice in confront of this whole world. I believe that, I hope, I mean, my grandmother all the time used to say that if things would not really go so bad, they would never reborn in a better manner. So I'm still holding to my grandmother's words. Maybe, you know, we are really going so deep and touching the untouchable to a point that then we need certainly to shift everything. We cannot go on this way. Yes.
You go. My name is Omar, and I'm from Nepal. And I have a question. And you said that you work in a refugee camp, right? And how is this host and guest relationship in refugee camp different from here, very normal?
Yeah, I mean, we were a bit speaking about this before, and I cannot tell you the whole. I would like to discuss other things with you, but basically, we were speaking about how hospitality is as important to Swedes. I'm living now in Sweden, and one of the things is that I realized how much important for refugees to still exercise their right to host, and this inspired me to continue exercising my own right to host, and it's a way for them to be able to become a political agent in the place where they are living. And then I realized it's not only about Swedes, it's not only about refugees, it's about Swedes that they give up completely as perfect citizens their right to host, and they accept that the only one that has the right to host is their own government. And in that sense, I want to bring you back maybe to Abu Dhabi. And in Abu Dhabi, it seems that everybody accepted that fact that you can be here only as a guest. You cannot be hosting, right? You are accepted here as long as you perform as a guest. And this is the contract you have with the place. And when I was a bit, I asked a friend of mine when the whole 5% tax thing came, and I asked him why nobody is saying anything, and he just says, but we are guests, why we should complain? I mean, if we don't like it, we just leave, right? And in that sense, what does it mean to live? Can you maybe
I think they have also got some food for you something as well, so someone could help with that. So in other words, we can have a transaction.
That would be fantastic. Yes, I will. Wow.
Yeah, I think so. You can put that in the. Yeah, usually it's the coast area. Do you plates? We need plates, right? Yeah.
We need plates? Yes, maybe. Wow, who cooked this?
Don't pass up the paper plate because after they leave, I don't want you cleaning up. So, to be kind. Oh, pass it on something else.
There's also honey.
So we should put honey on this?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. But we need an explanation.
So for those who are lucky, there'll be forks. For those who are not,
I don't think
we'll do what the ancients did it.
Forks are not necessarily apparent.
Perfect.
We can put the
The
fork.
ancients did it correctly.
If you need a spoon, though, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have the tiniest spoon man in the world. She said we don't need forks. So just pass it. Or is it someone could just hold the forks and hold it up like this instead of being filled?
I haven't had the one.
Pass it to her.
I don't know.
Deepak said for the cheese.
Let's see if there is more. I think that there is one more there. Yes, there is some.
Oh, yeah. Can you pass one?
Is that a special type of tea or?
It's tea with mint.
Oh, yeah. No, I understand. I've missed this taste like for 6 months now.
Oh.
Is there more?
Yeah, do you need more tea?
I think Deepak might.
Oops.
On the plate.
I will find and
Can I have honey?
Yeah, it's coming.
so I will bring the other tea. One second.
Did you finish your assignment?
Yes, thank you so much. Is it tea? Or what is it? Cheese. Oh, it's cheese.
So do we serve ourselves?
Passing it until somebody will open it. And then we can all say, I make some for you.
Yeah, I think she should.
Pass the pot.
Pass the plate.
Or just go ahead and grab it.
Oh yeah, we can pass the pot around.
Do it?
Just feel like that might be.
I've already had some. I was in the class.
Oh, so what do you want? So we,
She doesn't have tea, right?
I think Sandy should have.
Oh, yeah,
this is for you.
It's never.
Because he already had some. So
It's for me or for
for you.
So I will have some honey and custard.
Careful.
So straight.
Oh wait, I forgot to give you the honey.
They're just being nice.
So
and
who
they're-
cooked
they're
this?
really
No, my grandma's cook.
Ah, your grandpa. And tell us more about it.
Basically, it's called the Gemat. The Gemat, the like meat steam one is like it's like balls of the fried goat with honey. But this is like in original Arabic, it's called the Gemat. The Emirati one is the one.
I'm not picky, but it's very good.
Oh.
This is Emirati food.
This is Biharat.
Yeah.
Sweets. No,
It's like many pancakes.
Yeah. Seems so good.
Right.
And you normally eat it in which occasion?
It's like for breakfast
Yeah.
or
I mean,
after dawn, like for dessert.
Hey guys, did you tell them your names?
Yeah, maybe. It's like be generous with me. Tell
Yeah,
me
I'm
more
sorry.
about
I'm
you.
sorry. I just thought they'd do it. Okay, so why didn't you tell them?
I'm Philip. I'm from Macedonia / Skopje. Can I have some sugar?
Can you have some what?
Sugar.
Sugar, sure. Some sugar. This I can find you some sugar in the house that is very new.
For the tea. Oh.
You can put honey in it.
Oh, yeah, it is. But like I like really sweet.
Do you want to put honey in it? It's good.
Oh yeah.
You want the honey?
It's
Here's
Just
the.
making a run around with the sugar.
sorry. It's okay. I can use some honey.
No, it's fine. I can bring you the sugar. You're my
Thank you.
guest.
I'm sorry.
Just teasing. You all have sugar.
Here we are.
Thank you.
salt.
This is the honey.
Oh, perfect.
Can someone pass the pot around? Because I just have a bunch of cheese on my plate.
Still nobody's moving.
I mean, you are all of you are okay with. I'm comfortable with the silence. I'm quite impressed.
No, they're not. Trust me.
No, they are not?
They're faking it to the
Or it's the food.
I can put it here as well.
What is the cheese?
All of them.
It's
It's mine.
in there. Okay. Yes.
All right, guys, hurry up. I'm hungry. It's coming.
This is really nice.
The honey is perfect because it's never, it's stick to the.
Thank you, Grandma.
What is this?
Thank you, grandma. Yeah.
She gets an A plus.
Ah, it's good.
This
For the grandma.
Yeah.
here's the.
Can I have some more?
One second.
Just so the effect doesn't get down.
Thank you.
He's hungry.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, I'm Nick. I'm from South Korea, and I'd like to actually, yeah, sure, ask 2 questions to you. The first one is, what is this tea and how do you make it? Oh, that counts as one question, by the way.
This is the first. I mean, it's a tea. This is my mother's tea, and it's most probably a lot of Palestinian tea, and we put mint, fresh mint with it.
Okay.
It's a normal tea with fresh mint. This yellow normal thingy that you buy, but the fresh mint is what make.
Will it be okay for you to share the recipe?
Sure. If you want, we can make it all together. I mean, I can make it in front of you so you would see.
Nice. And also, my second question is, personally, so like you've hosted like a lot of guests in your living room before, right? So, what do you say would be like one thing that you like learned, especially by interacting with a lot of different people? Like,
here in the NYU in these 2 days, you mean, or generally?
Or generally, like, what is like something that, or like some kind of special maybe incident that happened while you were talking to people in the living room? Like, what is some like things that we might not know but you have experienced while hosting people in the living room?
Because of
I don't know. My personal feeling is that my major empowerment comes out of me hosting. If you want, even in terms of both social life, career-wise, solidarity-wise, I mean, all what you can think about. It feels like it takes a lot of effort to host, but at the end, it is a way to live a much better life. And maybe I would like to bring one Arabic word here that I really love. It's called al-afiyah. It's this one behind you. And this word in Arabic means the well-being, means holistic. I mean the holistic well-being is that you are in a good shape, in a good health. But also in Arabic you can say that this man has a lot of afiyah, means that he has, or this man is rich of afiyah, is rich of well-being. When you and it is the same to say this man has a lot of guests, and it's a sort of richness, and it's richness in a complete different manner. It feels, maybe I feel rich. Yeah, maybe this is what I can share about how I feel hosting. I feel a rich person. I feel. There is even one proverb in Arabic that says that more guests you have in your room, more you will live. You will be having a long life. I mean, in that sense, to say how rich you might be, healthy-wise, and so in that sense, hosting means that you sort of, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the feeling of being a very rich person is what occurred to me most when I think about myself hosting. But not rich in terms of money. I'm not rich by money.
At least you live a long life.
I hope. At least I will live a long life. Yeah.
I do have a question. You talked about the value of communal spaces and coming together. And maybe this school is a little bit of an exception, but often those sorts of, when you come together with people, it's often within, cultural bounds, within socioeconomic bounds. Does that matter? How do you break those sort of barriers? What are your thoughts?
I appreciate a lot an architect called Louis Khan, and Louis Khan one of the things, here I'm coming back all the time to architecture because it's one of the sources where I sort of feel more supported by. And Louis Khan says that the best school that he can ever imagine as an architect, or the best space for the school, is under a tree, where the teacher is not aware of being a teacher and where the students are not aware of being students. And there is all this shift between who is the teacher, who is the students under the shade of a tree. So in that sense, I still believe that it's very important to understand how even in the most places that are completely, you know, I cannot stand, and this is something that's happening to me in Sweden, it happens here everywhere, the whole idea of getting in all over the place. If you don't have your own card, you don't get in. No, this is how our world is becoming. You just make a mistake of one elevator down and then you are completely blocked and you need to call somebody to come and save you, because in a sense being accommodated in that building would not permit you to have the card for the elevator in the B2, but it will not, I mean, and this is something that sometimes it drives me crazy. You know, I feel I'm completely frustrated, that I feel in prison, but nevertheless, I think that we never should give up with what Louise Khan was advising us, to still be pretending that we want to be under a tree where we would confuse who is the teacher and who is the student, is my best way of understanding how school might be working. I don't know how this would help you, but this is what I, yeah.
Just, no, tell her what. Oh, right, yeah.
I know.
No. It's amazing. As into it. My name is Sriraj. I'm from India. But yeah, since we were talking about, like, you know, specific to here, or like, but then even before about the world in Abu Dhabi, not specifically the piece, but the idea of Ramallah Syndrome, I was very intrigued about it. Again, about the idea, because I remember we've often talked about how, though the piece is specific to Ramallah, how we as a world, or even in cities like even Abu Dhabi, where we might be in a similar place where there's this idea of safety outside, whereas there's a lot going around. So I just want to know what you think about that, and also even if as an entire like world or like humanity we're going towards that, where like even us sitting here, we're in a sense of safety, but there's so much going on, and there's only so many people who might actually be doing something about it.
Yeah, I mean, let me a bit, thank you for reminding me of it. It's not easy all the time to remember all the works because they are all linked with each other, but Ramallah Syndrome is one of the works that would be in the exhibition. And you know, when we come back to Palestine and we were sort of feeling ourselves completely foreigners, we decided to come back to live in Beit Sahur, which is the place where my family lives. And actually we come back with the birth of our first daughter, because we were seeking help and support, and of course it made sense absolutely for us to be nearby my family, and we decided to go there. And you know, a lot of people, and since then, when we come back to Palestine, we exposed the work in Venice Biennale, so everybody knew about, at least in Palestine, about our work, because it was seen as the first Palestinian pavilion in Venice Biennale, and we come back and everybody was thinking that no way we will resist in Beit Sahur, and that we will be finally going to live in Ramallah. We insisted on, no, our living room is in Beit Sahur. If you want to come throughout the checkpoints from Ramallah to Beit Sahur, you are welcome. Because normally, I mean, the whole cultural scene in Palestine is happening in Ramallah. And normally what they do is they go from Ramallah to the border, or border to Ramallah. I mean, border I intend when you want to leave the country. So you go to Jordan and you go through. So this is the only way people will get out from Ramallah in order to travel outside of the country. And they never come, and they never go to other cities in the West Bank, and they would be encountered for the checkpoints only when they are traveling seriously. And in the first 3 years, we were insisting, even when we are called by curators that come and visit Ramallah, we say, if you want to meet us, welcome to Beit Sahur. We are not coming from it. It became almost a very, an ideological manner, is that we don't come to that place that is completely trying to normalize the whole condition of Palestine. And there was certain articles at a certain point comparing the cappuccino of Ramallah to the cappuccino of New York, and the whole idea of the art scene and cultural life in Ramallah and the night there, and it felt like almost being in New York, forgetting completely that this bubble is a sort of embodied in it's like colonialism is all around the place, and it felt almost like craziness going on in that city. And what happened, each time people will come again to our living room and we are sitting this way, the major topic that we will be speaking about is the role of Ramallah in all this, because they arrive after 3 hours checkpoint and they say, oh my God, when you will be coming back to Ramallah, why should we each time have all this road in order to come to visit you? And therefore we decided, when Salwa asked us, when it was about the real Palestinian, years after stateless nation, there was this idea of bringing Palestinian artists in the Venice Biennale and have them all together in one pavilion. And our idea was, this is time for self-criticism. We cannot still be only representing what is happening in the whole colonial context between Israelis and Palestinians, because if we will not begin today and now to understand what kind of society are we building, then what we do with our freedom and what we will be doing the day after revolution. No? What kind of society we can envision. So the whole idea of Ramallah Syndrome, you get inside this very cold room, and we were very much inspired by these rooms that they used to be for people that have some madness in many ways. So in order for them not to hurt themselves, they would do for them some walls that are a bit soft walls, so you will not be hurted. And we felt like Ramallah was this thing, is that almost this, and we call it Ramallah Syndrome because it was a hallucination of a normal situation that was not normal one. There was this idea that Ramallah can still be representing the normality within a condition of colonialism, and this is why we call it Ramallah Syndrome, because it's all about this hallucination of normality within a condition that is absolutely, where normality is an impossibility, and this is why we saw this as a syndrome. And when you get inside that cold room, all what you will be hearing, these all discussions and shouting on the sofas of our living rooms, just like arguing the whole role of Ramallah and that strange syndrome in Palestine.
Was or is Ramallah was that? Or
Still, yes,
yeah,
of course. Especially now after No Jerusalem, Ramallah is the city by definition.
And so, do you think Ramallah is?
The what?
I have, this is.
Sorry, I'm just shameless here. You guys carry on discussing.
Please remind me of all. It's true. I should have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Ramallah is it treason or neutrality? Or is neutrality treason?
What repeat?
Do you consider not necessarily the people of Ramallah, but Ramallah as an idea?
Yes.
Do you consider it treachery, or are these people traitors, or
no?
are they just
neutral? No, I don't believe that we are speaking about traitors, rather than we are speaking about a syndrome. No, it's not necessary. When you have a syndrome, it's like. There is, what Jerusalem syndrome is, when somebody thinks that he's Jesus and he arrives to Jerusalem, or he's the one that everybody is waiting for, and people would really act seriously this way. They would shout so it's a syndrome that you just got, and no matter, there is no betrayer there, rather than a condition that was created. And I think, Ramallah is still embodied this attempt of bringing neoliberalism as a solution for the conflict. And you know, and it's good and bad. I mean, some of the people says, what is wrong with being elite? What is wrong with having a good life under colonialism? I mean, Beirut, everybody in Beirut was going for parties while the bombs were getting down. And in that sense, I think that it was a marriage between a bit of colonial power and neoliberal, because what Israelis understood during the first Intifada, that people were completely managing themselves beyond the state. And this was this was very scary, not for the Israelis, because if Palestinians would prove that they can live without state, this might be an issue for the rest of the world. And the first Intifada was so threatening. You know, in a place where I live, Beit Sahur was used to be the place for what they called the white Intifada, and we decided to throw away our ID cards and not to pay any taxes, no representation, no taxes, and we sort of, and at a certain point we even decided to buy some cows for the city and to raise them as a matter of drinking our own milk, and not, because this was the last thing that we need Israel for, because they didn't permit. And there is a great film actually about these cows that shows how the Israeli soldiers in all over the city were running from one mountain to the other, and people were hiding these cows because they actually realized that this is much more dangerous than people themselves. And they managed to get the cows. I mean, it was amazing how they were moving from one part to the other, just want to catch this possibility of people deciding to live their own life beyond colonialism. And they realized that they need the we were a people that lived for a long time without the whole neoliberal project, and they thought that they should bring it there. And Ramallah was this. And of course, you enjoy a lot of that. There are a lot of positive things out of this project, but in the same time, there is this hallucination of almost a normal city under colonialism.
How big is the population of Ramallah in comparison to other Palestinian cities?
It's not a big city. It's a city of 80,000, 60,000. We don't have cities really in Palestine. One major thing that we lost as Palestinians after the 48 is this idea of city, and maybe the only place where you have a real diversity is refugee camps. And then, of course, Ramallah also embodied the whole idea of the return of our fantastic leadership. So instead of, they left all refugees outside and they decided to return alone. So the whole fight for the right of return and the rhetoric for the right of return, you fight for the right of return while you are the first one to decide to take privilege of your return and then leave the rest of the refugees behind you was something that Palestinians are not even able to discuss. I believe we are still discussing the right of return as if nothing happened, while our leader just enjoyed it. All of what was considered the most dangerous leadership just returned back. So if these guys can return back home, so any other poor refugee can simply come back. But unfortunately, we don't discuss this. No, it's we discussed it much more in Ramallah Syndrome, but it's not a discussion that we have in the streets of Ramallah.
I have another question. I'm so sorry, I have a lot of questions.
You're hogging the whole thing. Does anyone else have?
Yeah.
So my name is Abdul Kareem. I'm from India. So you've mentioned refugee camps and hospitality. I had a question about that. So one of the classes that I did for Jake, and the professor was just here, Natalie, we had a reading for the class. It was about hospitality, and it was about this idea of hospitality being conditional, and that even when a country or somebody is hosting you, there is some sort of strings attached. Either it's to, you expect something in return, or it's to show that you're in a position of power, because a person that hosts another is supposed to, be in a position of power. So I just wanted to ask if you believe that there can be such a thing as unconditional hospitality, because the idea in this reading that was presented was that there's no such thing as unconditional hospitality, and that there are always certain strings attached. And I just wanted to know.
Are you referring also to Derrida in that sense, right? To the reading of Derrida of the unconditional hospitality. But anyway, it's the French philosopher.
I'm not sure. I don't remember his name. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah.
I just remember the idea.
So maybe I can. I'm sure. I mean, you are referring to because one, the master of the unconditional hospitality is basically that. French philosopher that has a lot of, he's French Algerian origin, and in that sense, Derrida figure out as a philosopher that if the society would not be able to exercise what he speaks about as an unconditional hospitality, and in that sense, he was very clear in what he says, we should put the law of hospitality on the top of the rest of the laws. And I will explain to you, he gave a very clear example that imagine, I'm hosting you, you come to my house, you knock the door and you get inside. And you are, and I think he was very much referring to Jewish at that time that were escaping and getting inside of the house of others, but you might have made a crime, right? You come to my house and I host you. Hospitality, in many ways, also in a place like the Arab world, but I think in many other societies, once I'm hosting you, I should protect you also. You are my host, so in all senses, I should be the one taking care of you. You get inside my door and I have the police ringing the door. Then you are in that room. What I would tell the police, are you in my house or aren't you? And the unconditional hospitality, according to Derrida, is when you say, I put the law of hospitality on top of all laws, and I would tell the police, he's not here, and I would protect you, and I would respect fully my guest. And that, therefore, this is a completely, this is the way where you put, when he speaks about law of hospitality as the major law. What my problem with all this and with the unconditional hospitality is that I believe Derrida understood that the West is going somewhere where it should not be going. And he got it that there is a lot of issues there. And I believe that he understood that if he would, if hospitality might become the law, then it might be a way to save the destiny of the West. This is my interpretation, right? And I can tell you from where I come personally. And in a sense, Derrida was unable to put himself in a position of who is in that moment. In which way we can use hospitality not to save the West, but rather than to demand rights, right? There is a huge difference between both, because from one side he was really calling for a society that put hospitality on top of everything, but he was unable to say what is the urgency for them to put hospitality and to consider the unconditional hospitality. He was unable really to say why then it is urgent. And then you come back, and I can tell you where, for example, there was a condition of unconditional hospitality, and then we can think about it better. In the desert, when you are one day guest and the day after you are a host, right? Because you have this urgency to move from one place to another, and you want to make sure that you are safe whenever you are hosted by another tribe, right? So if the law of hospitality is not put on top of the rest of the law, you are risking your life. So of course the unconditional hospitality was a major urgency. It wasn't to be discussed or to be put because we think philosophically it's important to be put as the law of the laws. No, and Derrida and he was very much actually referring to that law of the desert, but in a sense from a very foreigner point of view, because he was speaking about these 3 days of unconditional hospitality where you should not ask your host who you are. But this is coming as a rule from the desert where it is for your life safety. It's you want to make sure to sleep the night at the house of your host without being killed. And this obliged nomads to actually consider hospitality and urgency and to put this on top of all the rest of the things because their life was on stake. Now, what I am trying, I mean, I was very much inspired by the unconditional hospitality of Derrida, but I was thinking, what if we would use hospitality as a political tool to reverse power rather than to save the power, right? Because in that sense, in the mind of Derrida, it was a way to save what is already going into a wrong direction. And for me, is how can I use all this argument in order to gain political agency by hosting, right? So it's, and in that sense, I'm not sure if it is about unconditional hospitality rather than in the case of the two refugees I referred to, first Yasmin and Brahim, that they decide to exercise their right to host, or when refugees exercise their right to host, they exercise this as urgency. Because if they would not be hosting, they don't have political agency, right? If they would not open their door and build that network that needs to be built, then they don't have political urgency. And matter of fact, the people I saw among refugees that are still insisting on their right to host, they are doing this because of an urgency that they are living in. And I believe that, you know, what Derrida misses there is that what would be the urgency for an unconditional hospitality rather than feeling ourselves good? Because this is not enough reason, I believe.
So, not to interrupt, but it's been an hour and I promised them that I'm not 8. So it's 8 o'clock. Before we leave, though, tell them the names, because otherwise you'll think 3 people, one named Philip, Abdul Karim, and Sri came to visit with 14 strangers. That's not fair. Tell them the names at the very least, and put your plates away and looking good at you.
My name is Lamia. I'm from Abu Dhabi.
My name is Hachim. I'm from Morocco.
My name is Daniel. I'm from Ethiopia.
My name is Cassandra. I'm from Canada.
I am Sia. I'm from India.
I'm Rishabh. I'm from India as well.
I'm Aman from Nepal.
Adam from India.
I'm Nick from South Korea.
India. Abdul Karim from India.
I'm Danielle from Russia.
I'm Aisha from Abu Dhabi.
And thank you for your grandmother for all this.
She's still
Thank you.
Where should we put the things?
But I mean, if you want to a bit stay more,
you're welcome to. It's not, I'm not saying, okay, get out. It's like if you want to continue.
Yeah. I mean, if you are still interested in anything, I'm so happy to know you more, and maybe you can a bit more than questions. I would like to hear more from you if you can. If you still need questions from me, I'm so happy to answer them.
I actually have to go right now, but before I go, can I ask just the recipe of the tea?
Yes. I show you the recipe of the tea. Come.
I'm gonna make it this weekend.
Nick, at your
Nick
can post it.
Nick, I love you guys.